Winter break in rural Arizona was a stark contrast to the snowy landscapes I was accustomed to back home. As I drove through the desert with my trusty German Shepherd Duke riding shotgun, I couldn't help but marvel at the vast expanse of arid land stretching out before me. The cold air bit at my skin, a sharp reminder that even in the desert, winter could be unforgiving. Pulling up to my family's house, I was greeted by the warm glow of the porch light and the sound of laughter drifting through the chilly night air. The aroma of mesquite and sage wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the faint scent of pinon wood burning in the fireplace. It felt good to be back, to escape the hustle and bustle of city life for a few days of peace and quiet in the desert. Inside, the house was alive with activity. My cousins greeted me with hugs and laughter, their voices mingling with the crackle of the fireplace and the smell of home-cooked meals. It felt like old times, like nothing had changed since we were kids running wild in the desert. Duke bounded eagerly into the house, his tail wagging in excitement as he greeted each member of my family in turn. He was a beloved member of the family, his loyal and protective nature earning him a special place in all of our hearts. As the night wore on, the conversation flowed freely, fueled by good food and even better company. We reminisced about old times, shared stories and inside jokes that only we could understand. And through it all, Duke was by my side, his steady presence a comfort in the unfamiliar surroundings. But as the hour grew late and the fire burned low, a sense of unease began to creep into my mind. I glanced out the window, the darkness outside seeming to press in on the warm glow of the house. The desert at night was a different beast altogether, its vast emptiness both beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. After all, it was already 2 a.m. And then, just as suddenly as the feeling had come, it was gone, replaced by the sound of Duke scratching at the sliding glass door. I got up to let him in, but as I reached for the handle, a voice stopped me in my tracks. It was my cousin, his face pale with fear as he grabbed my arm with a trembling hand. "Don't open that door," he whispered, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's not Duke out there, it's something else." Confusion and fear flooded my mind as I turned to look at the figure scratching at the door. It looked like Duke, moved like Duke, but there was something off about the way it moved, something unnatural that sent a shiver down my spine. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. And as I turned to look back at my cousin, I saw Duke emerge from the hallway behind him, his eyes alert and ears perked up. My cousin's warning took on a new urgency as we both realized the truth. Whatever was scratching at the door was not Duke. It was something far more sinister I have heard of. Skinwalkers before. But damn, is that what we have just witnessed? I prepared for my hunting trip to the northern wilderness of Arizona. Memories of my grandfather flooded my mind. He had been an avid outdoorsman, teaching me everything I knew about tracking game and surviving in the wilderness. With his passing earlier that year, I felt a deep longing to reconnect with the land and carry on his legacy. But it wasn't just nostalgia that drove me to embark on this journey. Life had been hectic lately, with work consuming most of my time and stress weighing heavily on my shoulders. I needed a break, a chance to escape the pressures of everyday life and lose myself in the solitude of the forest. And then there was the promise I had made to my son. He had begged me to take him hunting, eager to learn the skills that had been passed down through generations of our family. But with his schoolwork and extracurricular activities taking up so much of his time, we had yet to find a chance to go together. So when the opportunity arose for me to take a few days off work and head out into the wilderness, I jumped at the chance. It was a chance to honor my grandfather's memory, to find solace in the quiet beauty of nature, and to bond with my son in a way that we had never done before. As I crept through the underbrush on the second night of my hunting trip, my senses on high alert, I stumbled upon a creature that seemed at first glance to be a bear. Its massive form sat hunched over in the moonlit clearing, its back turned to me as it emitted gut-wrenching sobs that echoed through the night. But as I drew closer, a sense of dread washed over me like a wave crashing against the shore. This was no ordinary bear. Its posture, its cries, they were too human, too eerie to be explained away by mere animal behavior. I stood frozen in terror, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of what I was witnessing. And then, without warning, the creature turned its head, its eyes locking with mine in the darkness. In that moment, I knew with a bone-deep certainty that this was no bear. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and ran, the pounding of my footsteps echoing through the forest as I fled back to the safety of my campsite. Every instinct screamed at me to get as far away from that place as possible, to put as much distance between myself and whatever horror lurked in the darkness. As I stumbled into camp, my breath coming in ragged gasps, I knew that I had to get out of there, and fast. Packing up my gear in record time, I made a hasty retreat back to town, the memory of that nightmarish encounter burning bright in my mind. I checked in at a dingy, rundown motel nearby. I just needed a place, rest my head before I headed back home. I really missed my wife and kids. Maybe the hunting trip wasn't the best idea. The next morning, as I stood at the gas pump, still reeling from the events of the previous night, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. The memory of the creature in the forest lingered in the back of my mind, its haunting cries echoing through my thoughts. Lost in my own thoughts, I barely noticed the figure approaching me until he was standing right beside me, a solemn expression on his weathered face. He introduced himself as a shaman of the local Navajo tribe, his eyes flickering with a mixture of curiosity and concern. I nodded in greeting, unable to shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me since my encounter with the creature in the forest. And then, without warning, the shaman's gaze shifted, his eyes narrowing as he caught a whiff of something on the air. "There's a stench on your clothes," he said, his voice low and grave. "A smell that shouldn't be here." I frowned, confused by his words. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing with a sudden sense of foreboding. The shaman's gaze bore into mine, his expression grave. "I fear that you may have encountered something unnatural in the forest," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Something that should not be." As he spoke, a chill ran down my spine, for I knew in that moment that he was speaking of the creature that had haunted my dreams since the night before. The shaman's words confirmed my worst fears, that what I had encountered in the darkness of the forest was something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. And as I stood there, face to face with the shaman, I knew that I would never be able to forget that weeping I heard,